By a stony creek in a valley, a black-clad young man was holding a black beetle with a metallic sheen that looked like a cross between a crab and a Hercules beetle. Holding a dagger in his other hand, the young man swiftly cut the still struggling claws off the beetle, revealing white and tender meat. Almost without hesitation, the young man sucked the meat out of the claws as if he were eating a crab, and swallowed it together with larger pieces of tougher meat. Black beetle killed.
No beast soul gun.
Eat the flesh of the black beetle to gain 0 to 10 geno points randomly. Black beetle flesh eaten. 0 geno points gained. A strange voice sounded in Han Sen's mind, and some data also appeared.
Han Sen, not evolved.
Status: none. Lifespan: 200 years. Required for evolution: 100 geno points. Geno points gained: 79. Beast souls gained: none. I have received 0 geno points from more than 30 black beetles in a row. I must have eaten too much black beetle flesh to evolve from it further. 0 points. When will I ever finish the first evolution and gain status?
Han Sen loked frustrated.
Over 100 years ago, science and technology reached a very high level, and humans finally mastered space teleportation technology. Shockingly, when they tried to be teleported, they found that they were neither sent back to the past nor teleported to the future. They didn't even travel from one planet to another. A completely different world lay at the other end of the space teleport channel, a world that human beings could not have imagined. In this world, all scientific and technological means lost their function. A machine gun in this world was not even as useful as a steel knife. Missiles and nuclear weapons would not explode, same as a heap of scrap iron. No mechanical or electronic equipment would work either. All kinds of horrible creatures inhabited this world. Human beings, who used to stand on top of the food chain because of their wisdom and technology, fell to the bottom. But when people killed certain relatively weak creatures and ate their flesh, they were surprised to find that their own bodies changed considerably and evolved quickly in ways that science could not explain. What made people pleasantly surprised was that in this world, with the evolution of the body, their lifespans also increased, which was amazing news to all mankind. In the following century, more and more people entered this world called God's sanctuary, gradually became familiar with the rules of this world, hunted its creatures, and saw their own bodies evolve. The higher the degree of physical evolution, the longer the life. Theoretically, if you could continue evolving, it could be possible to live forever. In this world, science and technology became completely useless. The only things that could help humans were the most primitive fighting skills. Ancient martial arts, which were almost forgotten in modern society, had an unexpected effect here. All kinds of ancient martial arts had been redeveloped, and after more than 100 years of development, new martial arts schools were formed and became prominent. In addition to ancient martial arts, God's sanctuary offered another tool to enhance humans, the beast soul. When killing a creature in God's sanctuary, a person had a chance to obtain the beast soul of the creature. Beast souls had all kinds of forms and appearances. Some could be summoned to fight for men, and some appeared in the form of armor or weapon. In addition, some beast souls could even help humans transform so they could take the shape of terrifying monsters, magical birds flying between heaven and earth, or insects drilling underground. Neither martial arts nor beast souls had anything to do with Han Sen. Even in modern society, advanced science and technology were in the hands of just a few people. Han Sen completed integrated compulsory education and entered God's sanctuary when he turned 16. What he had learned from school was no more than the beginning-level new martial arts that everyone knew. As for beast souls, they were so expensive that Han Sen couldn't afford even the cheapest. Without martial arts and beast souls, or even advanced man-made alloy weapons, Han Sen was only able to kill some low-level creatures to eat their flesh and evolve, and he was having a difficult time in God's sanctuary. But the more meat of low-level creatures he ate, the less effect of evolution he gained. 3 months in God's sanctuary, and he still could not complete a physical evolution. Han Sen had tried to kill some of the more powerful creatures, but even the weakest primitive creature, the copper-toothed beast, almost took his life. He had to rest for nearly a month before returning to God's sanctuary. By this time, Han Sen had eaten all kinds of ordinary creatures around him, and it wouldn't help to eat their flesh anymore. If he didn't risk hunting more advanced creatures, he would never evolve. When he was about to try to kill a copper-toothed beast, Han Sen saw something climbing out from the ripples of the creek. He originally thought it was a black beetle, but immediately noticed something different. All black beetles had black shells, but a bright golden color caught his eye. Han Sen gazed at the creature climbing out of the water. It really was a black beetle, but different from the ordinary ones because of its golden body as big as a basketball. It was like a sculpture carved from gold, and its eyes were crystal clear, like gems. It did not even look like a living thing unless observed carefully. Why is this black beetle so strange? Han Sen stared at the golden black beetle. Recently he had killed countless black beetles and knew everything about them. Their vision was poor, but their hearing was very sensitive. As long as he remained still, even in close proximity, a black beetle would not notice his presence. Han Sen stared at the strange beetle, and unexpectedly, it climbed toward him. Without hesitation, when the golden black beetle crawled next to Han Sen, he held down the golden black beetle's shell with one hand and swiftly cut into its fragile joints with the dagger in his other hand. He made 6 clean cuts vertically and horizontally to remove all 6 claws of the beetle. The golden black beetle struggled and flipped over. Taking this opportunity, Han Sen pierced his dagger into a white mark on its belly and turned it sharply. The golden black beetle suddenly stopped moving. Sacred blood creature black beetle killed. Beast soul of sacred blood black beetle gained. Eat the flesh of sacred blood black beetle to gain 0 to 10 geno points randomly. Han Sen was stunned by the sudden voice in his head, and he could hardly believe it was true. Sacred blood creature and sacred blood beast soul. Were those even real? The creatures of God's sanctuary were divided into 4 parts: ordinary creatures, primitive creatures, mutant creatures, and sacred blood creatures. Different geno points could be gained by eating flesh of creatures of different types. At that time, there were 4 God's sanctuary phases known to men. With each physical evolution completed, access to the next space would be permitted. The more powerful the geno points used in evolution, the higher the likelihood of surviving in the next space. Sacred blood beast souls were without any doubt the best beast souls. Any sacred blood beast soul could be sold at an enormous price. When Han Sen finally realized what had really happened, he was almost trembling. Holding the dagger to pick open the shell of the black beetle, he filled his mouth with meat as tender as jelly. Flesh of black beetle eaten. 1 sacred geno point gained. Feeling the flesh turn to energy and hearing the voice in his mind almost brought Han Sen to tears. He grabbed a claw and sucked out all meat from it, feeling waves of energy hitting his body and boiling his blood. There was not much difference between eating a sacred blood black beetle and eating a crab. After sucking the meat clean from all 6 claws, Han Sen started to cut the meat inside the shell. Flesh of black beetle eaten. 1 sacred geno point gained. Flesh of black beetle eaten. 1 sacred geno point gained. The strange voice continuously sounded in Han Sen's mind and made him feel on top of the world. As Han Sen was cutting away, he felt his dagger cut into something hard that made a sound like metal.
Han Sen stoppade.
Black beetles and crabs are alike. They look tough, but inside their shells there would be nothing but boneless meat. So how could there be metal? He removed the dagger, pulled aside the meat that had been cut, and saw a corner of black metal. Han Sen cut open all the meat surrounding it, and soon the black metal was completely exposed. At first he thought it was metal, but taking it out, he discovered that it was a black crystal the size and shape of a pigeon egg. Han Sen took the crystal in his hand and didn't feel anything abnormal. The crystal was just like a beautiful, rounded black pebble. But with a closer look, there seemed to be millions of stars shining in it, creating incredible beauty. Here is the easiest area in God's sanctuary, Han Sen thought. Even primitive creatures are hard to find here, let alone sacred blood creatures. How did this sacred blood black beetle suddenly appear? And I've never heard of a sacred blood black beetle before. Black beetles are such low life after all. And this sacred blood black beetle is so outrageously weak. Is its appearance related to the crystal? There was no clue, so he simply ate all the rest of the black beetle meat and was stuffed. He gained a total of 7 sacred geno points. 7 sacred Geno points were beyond his wildest dreams. With his background, he needed to risk everything even to kill a primitive creature, let alone a sacred blood creature. The shell of the sacred blood black beetle was also precious material, so Han Sen picked up all the claws and stuffed them into his pocket, together with the upper and lower shells. The shell of ordinary black beetles almost had no value, but the shell of a sacred blood black beetle would probably make a soup that could give him 1 or 2 more sacred Geno points. It was the first time Han Sen had eaten a sacred blood creature. Technically, he could max out and get 10 sacred Geno points. He already had 7 from the meat, and the other 3 should be in the shell. If he were to sell the shell, he could probably afford a nice private aircraft in Levo Interstellar Alliance with the money he received. On the way back to Steel Armor Castle, everyone was pointing at him, gloating and laughing, and no one would come near him. Everyone in the sanctuary was looking at him as if he were a monster. Normally, when an ordinary person went to the sanctuary, even if he were poor, if his martial skills were not too bad, he could always find some companions and kill a few primitive creatures together, and he would be nowhere near as miserable as Han Sen. However, in the entire Steel Armor Castle, no one was willing or had the courage to have anything to do with Han Sen. More than 3 months ago, Han Sen had entered God's sanctuary for the first time. The moment he stepped outside Steel Armor Shelter, he saw a giant white wolf unicorn standing with its back towards him around the corner of the rampart. Without hesitation, Han Sen grabbed his dagger and fiercely stabbed the unicorn in the ass. This stab turned Han Sen and Qin Xian together into the biggest laughingstock in Steel Armor Shelter. Yes, the white wolf unicorn was not a beast, but a human like Han Sen himself. She was just transforming using a beast's soul. Qin Xian was also the most powerful woman in Steel Armor Shelter. She was likely to finish her first evolution with sacred Geno points and embark on the path of evolution. A new guy stabbing Qin Xian's rear end became the biggest joke in Steel Armor Shelter. Although no one dared to mention this to Qin Xian's face, secretly everyone was laughing their asses off. And Ass Freak became Han Sen's well-known nickname in Steel Armor Shelter. Then Qin Xian declared that whoever spent time with Han Sen would become her enemy. In Steel Armor Shelter, few people could afford to be Qin Xian's enemy. Even if they could afford it, no one would risk antagonizing Qin Xian for the sake of a nobody and ass freak. That was why Han Sen had such a difficult time, but he didn't really blame Qin Xian. It was his fault in the first place. He was too nervous the first time he came to God's sanctuary, plus he had never seen creatures in his previous world or transformers before, which all led to the unforgivable mistake. Han Sen was already grateful that Qin Xian did not kill him in anger. The only lucky thing was that the teleportation into God's sanctuary was always random, and there were no familiar faces in Steel Armor Shelter, so no one knew his real name. Han Sen returned to his room, made a fire, and started boiling the black beetle claws and shells in a pot. Without tools and know-how, he could only use the most primitive methods to process the shells and extract the Geno essence. The shell of a sacred blood creature would take more than an hour or 2 to cook, so Han Sen covered the lid and took out the black crystal to take a closer look. Still, no clues whatsoever. Suddenly, Han Sen caught a glimpse of the caged green-scaled beast the size of a civet cat in the corner of his room and suddenly had an idea. Like black beetles, this green-scaled beast was an ordinary creature. Han Sen used to prey on them and bring them back to cook and eat to increase his Geno points. But later, green-scaled beasts no longer increased his Geno points, so Han Sen didn't eat the last beast and forgot about it. Surprisingly, it was still alive. He grabbed the moribund green-scaled beast from the cage, hesitated for a moment, and was about to feed the black crystal to the beast. To his surprise, seeing the black crystal, the dying green-scaled beast gathered all its strength to stretch out its tongue, roll the black crystal back into its mouth and swallow the whole crystal. There is indeed something magical about the black crystal. Han Sen was stunned and found that the green-scaled beast seemed considerably more lively after swallowing the crystal, its 4 claws scratching and head moving to bite Han Sen's hand, which was on its neck. Han Sen threw the green-scaled beast back into the cage and carefully watched it. The beast, which hadn't fed for days, completely recovered its vitality, thrashing and scratching wildly in the cage. just like it had when it was first caught. Han Sen sat across from the cage and watched the movements of the green-scaled beast. He had a guess, and if he was right, he might have obtained something incredible, something more exciting than a sacred blood creature. But Han Sen was afraid he was wrong, so he could only stare at the green-scaled beast anxiously, hoping to see the change that he desired. Han Sen nervously stared intently and did not realize that he was starving until he smelled bone broth from the pot. Looking at the time, he noticed almost 24 hours had passed. Rising to check the black beetle shell in the pot, he saw the golden color of the shell had been boiled off and the broth had become golden. It smelled so good that the hungry young man's mouth watered. About to scoop up a bowl of soup, Han Sen suddenly heard iron breaking from the cage of the green-scaled beast. He quickly turned around and saw the green-scaled beast had bitten off an iron bar of the cage and stretched out his head from the inside. Its light green scales had now completely turned a dark green color. Its teeth had become sharp and the tips of its 4 claws were like iron hooks. The beast was about to come out of the cage. Han Sen was pleasantly surprised and pulled out the dagger from his waist. He rushed to the front of the cage and stabbed the dagger into the lower belly of the green-scaled beast. With a turn of the dagger, the green-scaled beast stopped struggling. Primitive creature green-scaled beast killed.
No beast soul gun.
Eat the flesh of the primitive green-scaled beast to gain 0 to 10 points randomly. The strange voice sounded in Han Sen's mind and left him stunned. Primitive green-scaled beast? Primitive creature. So the crystal can really make these creatures evolve. Han Sen was overwhelmed with joy and did not know how to react. After a long time, he suddenly cut open the green-scaled beast with the dagger and uncovered the crystal as big as a pigeon egg. Taking no heed of the blood on it, he kissed the crystal twice and then wiped it clean, holding it in his hands like it was a great treasure. The crystal was really the reason the black beetle became a sacred blood creature. If the green-scaled beast had continued to evolve, could it have become a sacred blood creature too? Han Sen almost dared not think about it, because it was just too amazing. He was so excited that his hands were trembling while holding the crystal. He bit his tongue and cried out of pain so as to know that it really was not a dream. After remaining excited for quite a while, Han Sen carefully put the crystal away, gobbled up the shell broth, and gained another sacred Geno point, bringing his Geno point count to 8. Without tools and means, his primitive method couldn't extract all Geno essence from the shell, but it was good enough that he gained 1 sacred Geno point. Han Sen realized that he had gained a sacred blood beast soul of a black beetle when he killed the golden black beetle, and he quickly accessed his profile.
Han Sen, not evolved.
Status: none. Lifespan: 200 years. Requirements for evolution: 100 Geno points. Geno points gained: 79 Geno points, 8 sacred Geno points. Beast soul gained: sacred blood black beetle. Type of sacred blood black beetle's beast soul: armor. What would the armor of sacred blood black beetle's beast soul look like? Before Han Sen finished the thought, a golden shadow shot out of thin air, looking exactly like the golden black beetle. The golden black beetle flew to Han Sen's chest, turned into a golden liquid and started to cover his whole body. In the blink of an eye, Han Sen's whole body, together with his hair, was all wrapped up. The streamlined gold armor was full of power and impact, and covered his whole body as if it were a suit of Gothic medieval armor instilled with improved aerodynamics. It looked just like a piece of art. The whole suit of armor felt full of power and speed, making Han Sen look slender and majestic, as if his whole body were full of explosive power. With shining metallic luster, the armor was gorgeous and had a solid texture. At first glance, it was even somewhat like the gold cloth worn by golden saints. The difference between the gold cloth and the beast soul armor was that the armor covered the head and body completely, with only a few gaps in the joints where different pieces overlapped, just like the black beetle itself, which was the only weakness of the beast soul armor. Han Sen moved around in the armor, and there was no feeling of heaviness or clumsiness. Instead, he felt that his body had become a little lighter and full of energy. Indeed, this was armor from a sacred blood beast soul. It is way more gorgeous than the ones from primitive beast souls that I often have seen at steel armor shelter.
Han Sen felt extatik.
He used to envy people in armor of primitive beast souls and had never thought he would get a suit of a sacred blood beast soul one day. Yate Group President Zhao Yalong completed the third evolution, entered Fourth God's Sanctuary, and became the 83rd human in history to enter Fourth God's Sanctuary. His lifespan has reached 500 years, and he has gained the status of demigod. The prodigy from Rycote Galaxy, Lang, entered Second God's Sanctuary with 100 mutation geno points. His lifespan has reached 300 years, and he has gained the status of Evolver. The Speaker of the House of Representatives, Hemingway, killed a demigod creature star of the ocean yesterday and was the first to accomplish this feat. According to authoritative experts, in 10 years someone will complete the fourth evolution for the first time and advance into Fifth God's Sanctuary. Han Sen had just teleported from the steel armor shelter, and the news was playing on a virtual screen. Evolver, Surpasser, and Demigod. With the black crystal, I will be able to do all that and go even farther. Han Sen shook his fist, stepped away from the teleport station, and took the maglev train home. Before he went into the yard, Han Sen heard a harsh female voice. Luo Sulan, do you want to take the old house of the Hans? This house was our parents', and my two elder brothers and I each own a part. Now my eldest brother has passed. We won't bully you, since you are a widow, and will leave you his share. But if you want to take everything, we will never agree. That's right. The voice of a middle-aged man chimed in. The old house has always been the inheritance of our parents. All of us have rights to it, and you can't keep it for yourselves. Your family has lived here for more than 20 years, so you have already taken advantage of us in a big way. It is time to divide the inheritance. My brother has said it, a soft-pitched male voice continued. You lived in the old house for more than 20 years. We will not collect the rent, but this old house is our inheritance and has to be divided. A young woman's voice could be heard saying, we have an estimate from a lawyer, and this old house is now worth more than 3 million. We are 3 households, so we should get $1 million each. You can either give each of us $1 million and own this old house outright, or sell the house, and then we all split the money. We are okay with either option you choose. Exactly, now that our eldest brother is gone, we won't bully his widow and kids. You can give us money or sell the house, as you like. The harsh first voice began again. Brother and sister, there is no need to force me. You know our situation. We don't have 2 million, a woman said sadly. Then put the house up for sale, the harsh woman immediately said. Where would we live without a house? Han Sen just graduated and Han Yen is about to go to school, the sad woman said. Sister-in-law, this is not reasonable. How are you the only one with troubles? Your kids Han Sen and Han Yen are only enrolled in integrated compulsory education, while my Han Hao goes to a private school. His tuition gives me gray hair every year. Sister, you are right. We are all having a hard time and everyone needs money. Why don't we just sell the house? We could all take some, and you could afford Han Yan's education, said the effeminate voice. Anyway, you either give us money or sell the house. Your choice, the young woman said coldly. Outside the house, Han Sen became furious as he listened. He pushed the door open and saw his mother shedding tears while holding his sister, Han Yen. The 5-year-old girl curled up in the arms of her mother, her big eyes full of fear. Next to them, 2 men and 2 women were all smiling indifferently. How dare you come here and ask for the old house? Han Sen pointed to the fierce-looking fat woman and exclaimed in anger. Aunt, you used to be an accountant in the company and brought about tens of millions in bad debts. Did my dad not help you after you begged him?
Han Sen, what nonsense.
Who caused bad debts? Stop lying, the skinny guy with the effeminate voice cried, pointing to Han Sen. Uncle, you embezzled the company's public funds to invest and lost a few million. Han Sen pointed to the skinny guy. Did you not come to my home and get on your knees to beg my dad for help? And you, uncle, you owed so many gambling debts that you were almost forced to commit suicide. Who helped you? When you were almost beaten to death, who saved your life? Han Sen pointed to the fat, middle-aged man. Starry Group wanted to acquire our family business. If my dad didn't represent all of you, and then had a falling out with Starry Group, would he have died in such a shady way? Han Sen clenched his teeth, looking at the four. But you skipped my dad's funeral and sold the company to Starry Group upon his death. Did you give us any of the money you got from selling the company? Also, who paid for your houses when you got married? Were those houses any cheaper than this old house? Did you take care of your parents for a single day when they were alive? How dare you come here to ask for a share of the old house? Stop it. Your father only did what he wanted to do. The company belonged to my father, and we all have shares. He can't decide for us. And surely, we can spend the money of the company, Uncle Han Lei said brazenly. That's true. Your father was a dictator, and we are only getting our own money back. It does not matter what you say. Give the money or sell the house, otherwise we'll see you in court. You will lose the case wherever we go, Aunt Han Yume shouted. It's all your dad's fault. They started to accuse Han Sen's late father. Han Sen was shaking with anger and felt wronged for his father. When his father took over the company, it was only a small business, worth 1 or 2 million. He spent so much effort for the company to bloom and had to look after his family and make up for their mistakes. A few times the company was on the brink of bankruptcy due to liquidity problems, and he even died for the company. After his death, however, his wife and children were bullied by the relatives that he used to help. When Han Sen's father was alive, he always said that they were family and there's no need to argue. And what an irony it has become now. If they truly needed the money and had difficulties, Han Sen would just agree to give it. But all the private aircrafts they piloted here were worth more than 1 million. And they at least got 10 million from selling the company, which all fell into their pockets, and nothing was given to Han Sen's family. It was simply impossible that they didn't even have 1 million. After making a fuss at Han Sen's home, Han Yume and Han Lei gave his family an ultimatum. They had to come up with the money or sell the house in 1 month. Otherwise, they would file a lawsuit. I'm so useless that I can't even keep the house. Luo Sulan held Han Yin, her face covered with tears. Luo Sulan was a gentle lady. When Han Sen's father was still alive, she was treated like a princess. She didn't even know how to sweep the floor, let alone do other chores. Han Sen knew how difficult it was for her to raise his sister and him after his father passed away. Don't worry, Mom. I am here even though Dad isn't. I will not let them take away our house. You take a rest, and I'll consult Uncle Zhang on the matter. Han Sen called a friend of his father's, Mr. Zhang. He was the lawyer who used to work in their family business as legal counsel.
Uncle Zhang.
This isn't. Is your back any better? I have a legal matter that I want to ask you about. So? Han Sen looked a little pale when he hung up. He had confirmed that his relative told the truth. They do have rights to a part of the house. And if they really did go to court, the verdict would be close to what they've asked for, to either pay them money or sell the house. Sen, what did Mr. Zhang say? Luo Sulan asked Han Sen, looking at him nervously. Don't you worry, Mom. I have checked with Uncle Zhang and there is a solution. You just make sure Yin is okay, and I'll take care of this. The house will not be taken away by anyone, Han Sen said with a smile. That's good, that's great. Luo Sulan breathed a sigh of relief. Having rested at home for a night, Han Sen took a train to the teleport station and entered God's sanctuary in the morning. Han Sen was teleported to his room at the steel armor shelter. When one was teleported into God's sanctuary, one would appear in a certain room only accessible to him or her. Unless permitted by the owner, others were not able to enter the room. Before finishing the first evolution and entering second God's sanctuary, this was Han Sen's home in God's sanctuary. Now Han Sen had no power or influence. The only solution was to come up with $2 million in a month if he wanted to keep the house. Although he felt it was unfair, without power, there was nothing left to do. $2 million Levo dollars was an enormous amount for a young man who just finished integrated compulsory education. In the past, Han Sen couldn't have earned $2 million in a year, let alone in a month. But now everything was different. In fact, if he had not already cooked the shell of the sacred blood black beetle, the shell alone would be worth 1 or 2 million. Even without the shell, he still had the black crystal that could make creatures evolve. As long as he had that, 2 million was nothing. Looking at the body of the primitive green-scaled beast on the ground, Han Sen hesitated for a moment before cutting the body into pieces. He then dried the meat, made it into beef jerky, and carried it with him in his waist pack. He must first catch a creature before he could use the crystal to make it evolve and trade the flesh of the evolved creature for money. Now that Han Sen owned a suit of sacred blood beast soul armor, he could up his game and start to hunt primitive creatures instead of ordinary creatures. Primitive creatures weren't worth much, and he would waste a day's time waiting for an ordinary creature to evolve into a primitive one. To come up with 2 million, Han Sen would need to sell at least a mutant creature. Primitive creatures were usually seen a dozen kilometers from steel armor shelter. Han Sen had not dared to go that far before, but now he has had his armor. This time, his goal was no longer a copper-toothed beast, the weakest among all primitive creatures, but the swift mantis often spotted in Zephyr Valley. Although a primitive creature, a swift mantis had a fragile body and could easily be killed by a normal alloy dagger if stabbed in a vulnerable spot. However, a swift mantis was so fast that ordinary people couldn't keep up with it, and its pair of hacksaw-like forelegs could easily split human bones. Once hit by the forelegs, a person would be crippled, if not killed. So few humans would go to hunt this creature. For Han Sen, however, the swift mantis was the best option. It was in the end only a primitive creature, and there was no way it could cut open his sacred blood beast soul armor. If he couldn't be hurt by the mantis, surely he could kill it. The most important thing was that with claws and wings cut off, a swift mantis could no longer fight back but could still live. This way, Han Sen could easily take it back, keep it in his room, and use the black crystal to make it evolve into a mutant creature before he sold its flesh. Of course, if he were able to kill a few swift mantises and got lucky, he might even gain a beast soul. The beast soul of a swift mantis was in the shape of a swift, jagged blade, which was a long dagger, a type of weapon Han Sen had mastered. Although the swift, jagged blade was only a primitive beast soul weapon, it was the sharpest of all primitive weapons, and could even compare to some mutant beast soul weapons. Because of the danger of hunting swift mantises, few would go to Zephyr Valley, and even fewer had obtained a swift, jagged blade. If the rare weapon were to be sold, it would cost more than 2 million. So, if Han Sen could score a beast soul of a swift mantis, there would be no need to sell mutant creature flesh anymore. The closer Han Sen got to Zephyr Valley, the fewer people he could see. Around the valley, there was no human activity at all. Han Sen did not dare to go too deep, so he found a hidden place and summoned the sacred blood black beetle beast soul to cover himself in the golden armor. Taking a deep breath, he sneaked towards Zephyr Valley. Han Sen did not dare to go too fast. The valley was covered with trees and wild grass as tall as a man. As the trees and grass swung with the wind, it was difficult to spot any swift mantis that might be hiding there. Even momentary carelessness could lead to broken bones from a mantis attack. Suddenly, Han Sen saw something green, about a foot long, sticking to the grass like a leaf. If he didn't look closely, he would have thought it was part of the grass and would have never imagined it to be a swift mantis that could split a human skull with a single blow. Its pair of sickle-like, jagged forelegs were even longer than its body. Dark green in color, the forelegs were covered in a metal sheen, and were nothing like its fragile body. The rigidity of the forelegs was definitely comparable to the most advanced alpha alloy. Han Sen was lucky that he found the swift mantis before it saw him. Moving towards it, he calculated the nearest he could get to it before being noticed by the swift mantis. When he was about 6 feet away from the swift mantis, Han Sen did not dare to go any farther, fearing he might lose the opportunity to attack by stealth. Tightly holding the dagger in his hand, Han Sen rushed out from the grass and cut at the swift mantis' waist in a fast and ruthless strike. But Han Sen had still underestimated the speed and responsiveness of the swift mantis. It had noticed his presence the moment he rushed out. All of a sudden, it rose into the air, gliding with wings spread towards Han Sen in a truly swift move. Its forelegs had cut him in the head before he could even react. Han Sen subconsciously stepped back in shock, yet the mantis foreleg still hit his head. With a sound of metal clashing, Han Sen felt only slight discomfort, as if his head were hit by a stone. And there was not even a scratch on the sacred blood beast soul armor. Filled with ecstasy, Han Sen seized the opportunity to cut into the slim waist of the swift mantis in front of him with a fierce stab. The swift mantis was cut into two halves, green mantis blood splashing him wet all over. Han Sen didn't care at all and listened to the strange voice in his head blissfully. Primitive creature swift mantis killed.
No beast soul gun.
Eat the swift mantis to gain 0 to 10 primitive geno points randomly. Touching his helmet where the swift mantis cut to feel it was still smooth, Han Sen thought to himself in excitement, "Ha ha, the armor is everything. With my armor, I could kill whatever I want to kill, and no one could ever hurt me. I wouldn't even fear mutant creatures." Han Sen suddenly gained courage and stopped hiding. He marched to Zephyr Valley and alerted several swift mantises to attack, but they couldn't hurt him at all by cutting his armor. Han Sen took the opportunity to kill them all, each with one stab. Primitive creature swift mantis killed.
No beast soul gun.
Eat the swift mantis to gain 0 to 10 points randomly. Primitive creature swift mantis killed. The voice continuously sounded in his mind, adding to his thrill. He stabbed his way through the valley and killed more 20 mantises in succession. Su Xiaoqiao was on his way to Zephyr Valley as well, quietly mulling over his own bad luck. His parents were the owners of an interstellar conglomerate and were considered both distinguished and aristocrats. He, however, was randomly assigned to Steel Armor Shelter, where he had no friends or even acquaintances. To get an aristocratic title, Su Xiaoqiao could only choose to follow Qin Xian in order to max out on mutant geno points and become an evolver. There were two types of titles in Levo Interstellar Alliance. One was distinguished. Once one became a surpasser, one could be certified as distinguished. The other was an aristocratic. If one could evolve with 100 mutant or more advanced geno points, one could be certified as an aristocrat. Either title involved a lot of benefits in the Alliance, and most importantly, they were a symbol of social status. Today in the Alliance, people were more and more snobby. People from the upper class wouldn't even talk to someone without a title, even when doing business. Advanced titles like Sacred Blood Aristocrat were beyond Su Xiaoqiao's dreams. All he wanted was to gain the title of Ordinary Aristocrat by maxing out on mutant geno points and completing an evolution. However, to get 100 mutant geno points was still too difficult for him on his own. He did bring a lot of money to Steel Armor Shelter, but money could only buy ordinary and primitive creature flesh, as very few people would sell mutant creatures. Only people who aimed to max out on sacred geno points like Qin Xian would sometimes sell the mutant creature flesh they had. However, it wasn't money that she wanted, but loyalty and service. Su Xiaoqiao was now running errands for Qin Xian, exploring the places less known to people and looking for traces of sacred blood and mutant creatures to gather information for her. With the information, she could then gather a team to hunt down these creatures, and the team members would get mutant creature flesh in return. Su Xiaoqiao had been exploring for a month and found no traces of mutant creatures, not to mention sacred blood ones. Running out of supplies, he had to return to Steel Armor Shelter. When he passed Zephyr Valley, he thought there might be mutant creatures around, as the area was so sparsely populated. After he sneaked in the valley, he felt something strange. He didn't see any swift mantises, not even one. A mile into the valley, all he saw were some messy traces on the ground. Someone must have wiped out the swift mantises. Fist Guy or Son of Heaven?
No.
Although there are signs of fighting, there should be more damage if it were a group of people. Surprised, Su Xiaoqiao sped into the valley, wondering what had happened. As he expected, there were many green blood stains from swift mantises along the way. He followed the blood stains and turned a corner. What he saw stopped him in his tracks, appalled. Next to the piled bodies of swift mantises stood a golden figure. In the sun, the figure looked like a robot in gold cast armor. "Brother, you killed all these swift mantises?" Su Xiaoqiao saw no one except for the guy in golden armor. The dead mantises were still bleeding, so they couldn't have been dead for long. Su Xiaoqiao couldn't believe that someone was able to kill so many mantises in such a short amount of time. Although the swift mantis was only a primitive creature, considering the sharpness of its forelegs and its speed, even those who had maxed out on primitive geno points didn't dare to provoke it. After all, there were too many weak spots on human body, and no one wanted to risk losing his life or getting severely injured from a mantis cut. There were at least 3 dozen dead swift mantises on the ground. Even Qin Xian would need some helping hands to achieve this. Su Xiaoqiao wouldn't believe that someone could have done it alone. Want some? 1,000 levo dollars each. Han Sen was just considering what to do with the mantises. He was on a killing spree and forgot the fact that there was no way he could eat so much mantis meat. And even if he could eat them all, only the first few could gain him Geno points. 1,000 each? Are you sure? Su Xiaoqiao looked at him, surprised. Although many people were able to hunt primitive creatures, they were in short supply, especially the ones that most people had never eaten, like swift mantis. After all, people's energy was limited, and there was a limit to how many Geno points the meat from the same type of creature could offer. Only by eating the flesh of a variety of creatures could one keep collecting Geno points. Those who were relatively well off would all be willing to pay for the creatures they hadn't eaten yet in order to be able to quickly max out on their primitive Geno points. Therefore, the primitive creatures that were easy to kill could bring a few hundred each, while the ones that were difficult to hunt, such as the swift mantis, could sell for 2,000 or 3,000 each and still be in short supply. Su Xiaoqiao calculated and figured that he could double or triple the price if he could transport these mantis bodies back. Yes, 1,000 levo dollars each.
Han Sen nodded.
It wasn't that Han Sen did not know what the mantises were worth. Without a car or other tools, there was simply no way he could move all these bodies back on his own. And if he left now, the bodies might be stolen when he returned. Moreover, Han Sen did not want to waste his time and energy on this. He had more important things to do, and he could take some loss of the profits. As the wholesaler, he had to leave some profit to the retailer. Sure, I'll take them all. How many are there? Su Xiaoqiao was on board. The swift mantises could bring him more than money. Primitive creatures like the swift mantis that ordinary people couldn't easily access would make great gifts. No one could refuse such a nice offer, as long as they hadn't maxed out on primitive Geno points. A total of 43. I'll give you a discount and charge only 40,000. Han Sen was just casually asking and did not expect this ordinary-looking guy to be so rich that he could buy them all. Su Xiaoqiao took out his wallet and pulled out 10 $10,000 notes. Brother, I'll give you 50,000 for these mantises. The other 50,000 is a down payment for whatever good stuff you may have in the future. I'll always give you a good price and would pay even higher for mutant creature flesh. 100,000 was a small amount for Su Xiaoqiao. It would even cost him as much to buy someone a fancy dinner. This person was so badass that he killed all these mantises on his own, so it was highly likely that he could hunt mutant creatures too. If it was possible to purchase mutant creature flesh from him, a few 100 million was nothing. Couldn't tell you were rich? Han Sen took the money and said bluntly, looking at Xiaoqiao slightly surprised. In all honesty, money is all I have. If you have mutant creature flesh to sell, do let me know. The price is definitely not a problem, Su Xiaoqiao boasted, afraid that he might lose this great opportunity. Great. What's your name and address? I will come and find you if I have something. Han Sen appreciated Xiaoqiao's generosity and thought he might be an ideal buyer for the mutant creature he planned to produce using the black crystal. After all, the black crystal had to remain a secret. Selling the creature to one person was much better than selling it in the market in front of everyone. And he didn't even need to worry about the price since Xiaoqiao was incredibly rich. Brother, my name is Su Xiaoqiao, and that's my real name. My room number at Steel Armor Shelter is 1046. How about you? What's your name and where do you live? Su Xiaoqiao said. Dollar. That's the only thing I care about. Prepare some money, and I'll go to room 1046 once I have something. Han Sen put the money into his pocket, waved goodbye to Xiaoqiao, and left Zephyr Valley. Having been through his father's death, Han Sen did not want to have too many exchanges with others. He just wanted to take care of his mother and sister and do his own thing. Other people or things didn't really affect him. Brother, I'll wait for you. You must come. Remember, the price is definitely not a problem. Su Xiaoqiao shouted at the back of Han Sen while waving his hand. After Han Sen left, Su Xiaoqiao couldn't help but call out, "How could I get these back?" Su Xiaoqiao thought for a while and decided to carry some back in a bag and ask some friends to help him carry the rest. Fortunately, There were almost no humans in Ziahir Valley. When Su Xiaoqiao came back with friends, all the bodies were still there. Xiaoqiao, is it true that Dollar killed all these swift mantises? Su Xiaoqiao's friends looked wide-eyed at the pile of mantis bodies. Of course. Although I did not see him hunting, there was no one else in Zephyr Valley at the time, and the mantises had just died. Who else could it be? Su Xiaoqiao said. I think it must be a gang of people that killed these swift mantises, and others must have left him to deal with the bodies. I don't believe one person could kill so many mantises. He must be bragging. He was definitely bragging. None of Su Xiaoqiao's friends believed Han Sen killed the swift mantises alone. Han Sen didn't go back to Steel Armor Shelter after leaving Zephyr Valley. In a flash, he killed every swift mantis in a frenzy so that there were none left. Well, I'll just go hunt a copper-toothed beast. There are plenty of them near Steel Armor Shelter, and there is a high chance of catching a mutant copper-toothed beast, so it wouldn't seem too suspicious if I were to produce a mutant one using the crystal. Han Sen found a habitat of copper-toothed beasts and wanted to catch one that was alone. Only able to find a small group of copper-toothed beasts, Han Sen went ahead and killed all of them but one, taking advantage of his tough armor. Primitive creature copper-toothed beast killed.
No beast soul gun.
Eat the flesh of copper-toothed beast to gain 0 to 10 primitive geno points randomly. Primitive creature copper-toothed beast killed. Primitive beast soul of copper-toothed beast gained. Eat the flesh of copper-toothed beast to gain 0 to 10 primitive geno points randomly. Han Sen's eyes widened in surprise. The 43 swift mantises and thousands of ordinary creatures he had killed didn't render a single beast soul. Now he had killed only 2 copper-toothed beasts and gained a beast soul. To get a beast soul requires pure luck. Han Sen was filled with joy. Although it was common, the beast soul of a copper-toothed beast was quite nice to have. The copper-toothed beast was one of the weakest among all primitive creatures, but its beast soul was popular. Han Sen summoned the new beast soul, and a porcupine-like shadow with bronze fangs shifted into a bronze crescent spear in his hand. The crescent spear had a bronzy sheen and a menacing look with its crescent-shaped spearhead. Type of primitive beast soul of copper-toothed beast. Weapon. Han Sen played with the spear for a while, looking quite fierce. He was taught basic spear skills at school. Han Sen was interested in all kinds of weapons, so he learned well. Han Sen put away his spear before he grabbed the living copper-toothed beast and went back. On his way back, he found a lonely spot to remove his armor. Looking like himself again, Han Sen went back to Steel Armor Shelter, carrying the knocked-out and tied-up copper-toothed beast on his shoulder. At the gate of the shelter, a gang of about a dozen people were marching out, all riding on different tall beast soul mounts, headed by a man wearing steel armor and carrying a blood-red sword on his back. The man was riding a triceratops-like beast soul mount, looking mighty and majestic, attracting envious glances from all around. In Steel Armor Shelter, there are 3 outstanding persons who aim to complete evolution by maxing out on sacred geno points. This man, Son of Heaven, was one of them. Han Sen didn't know his real name and identity, but he was definitely a king in Steel Armor Shelter. Carrying the copper-toothed beast, Han Sen stepped aside to let the gang pass. However, Son of Heaven stopped his mount when passing by him. Crack! Son of Heaven looked at Han Sen and slashed him on the shoulder with a leather whip. The copper-toothed beast fell on the ground, and Han Sen's clothes were ripped apart. A wound started to swell on his shoulder and back. Who had the nerve to sell you this primitive creature? Son of Heaven asked in a cold tone, looking down at him condescendingly. In Steel Armor Shelter, everyone knew that Son of Heaven was wooing Qin Xian. Ass Freak who stabbed Qin Xian in the rear naturally became his enemy. He was also one of the reasons why Han Sen was miserable. When learning Qin Xian was stabbed, Son of Heaven not only had Han Sen beaten up, but also let everyone know that whoever would dare to do business with Han would become his enemy for life. I hunted it myself. Han Sen stared back coldly, fist clenched but standing still. Not only had Son of Heaven gained a lot of geno points, but he also had collected many beast souls. Since he had help from his gang, Han Sen wouldn't be able to touch the guy even with his best effort. Even with his sacred blood armor, he would be beaten to death before he approached Son of Heaven. God's sanctuary was different from the Alliance in that there was no law at all. Power was everything. Han Sen would only die in vain. Plus, Son of Heaven was said to be of prominent origin in the Alliance. Even if Han Sen were killed by him in the Alliance, Son of Heaven might not be subject to legal sanctions. Han Sen was not afraid of death. But if he died, what about his mother and sister? If I find out that someone dares to sell to you, I'll make sure you both die in pain. Son of Heaven looked around and rode away. Ass freak, don't make trouble, or else I don't mind teaching you another lesson. Luo Tianyang smirked at Han Sen before following the gang on a black wildebeest. Luo Tianyang, a henchman and old acquaintance in the alliance of Son of Heaven, was one of those whom he sent to beat Han Sen up. Han Sen watched the gang going away with fire burning in his eyes. He picked up the copper-toothed beast quietly and walked towards steel armor shelter, with everyone watching him with derision. Stronger. I need to become stronger. With scorching anger in his chest, Han Sen knew he was far too weak to fight the gang on his own. The black crystal, however, was his biggest opportunity. Son of Heaven, just get rid of him for good, Luo Tianyang said coldly. Son of Heaven smiled and said, Qin Xian is a stubborn girl. She doesn't like people to intervene in her business. Since she did not kill Han Sen, she might be upset if I did. What an unwise woman! Another henchman of Son of Heaven, Peerless Sword, said. It's her honor that you, bro, would chase her, while she just puts on airs. If it weren't for you, I would have killed her already. Don't put Qin Xian down. She is quite something in both God's sanctuary and the Alliance. If she becomes mine, it will be a huge advantage to me. Son of Heaven said grimly. End of discussion. We need to get to Sunset Slope before Fist Guy's gang. That sacred blood creature has to be ours. Han Sen returned to his room, tied the copper-toothed beast to a cage, and put the black crystal in front of it. The beast gobbled up the black crystal greedily. After an entire day, Han Sen noticed some changes to the copper-toothed beast. Its fur had been gray-black like a wild boar, and its fangs had been bronze. Now its fur also started to show a bit of bronze luster, and the fangs had become brighter in color. However, this was not a true mutant copper-toothed beast, which ought to look like a bronze statue. Although this one did show some bronze luster, it was still quite different from a mutant one. It seems that the evolution from a primitive creature to a mutant creature is a more complex process than from ordinary to primitive, so it requires more time than one day, Han Sen pondered. After more than 2 days, its bronze color thickened. But the copper-toothed beast still didn't look like it was going to evolve anytime soon. Han Sen had to let the beast evolve at its own pace and go kill some primitive creatures for money. Plus, he could also use some primitive geno points. Even if one didn't choose to use the primitive geno points to complete evolution, the more primitive geno points one gained, the stronger the body would become. And the same went for ordinary and mutant geno points. If one could max out on ordinary, primitive, and mutant geno points, one's physical conditions would still be far beyond the average level, even without evolution. With the black crystal, it wouldn't be difficult for Han Sen to max out on all 4 types of geno points. At the moment, he wanted to max out on the other 3 before he focused on sacred geno points. Han Sen left his room and walked into the shelter, feeling slightly different. Today the streets seemed to be a lot less crowded than usual. What's going on? Han Sen walked past the plaza and found fewer stalls there than usual as well. People there were all whispering something to each other. Han Sen listened for a while and started to figure out what had happened. A few days ago, someone had spotted a new sacred blood creature near the Sunset Slope. Somehow the 3 gangs in steel armor shelter all found out about it and gathered at the slope. But the outcome was terrible. The sacred blood creature ran free while a lot of men were killed. Today, Qin Xian, Son of Heaven and Fist Guy had reached an agreement to hunt the sacred blood creature together. They also recruited a lot of lone wolves and smaller groups, forming the largest campaign in steel armor shelter in recent years. The 3 gangs were determined to kill this creature. Han Sen suddenly had an idea, so he turned around and ran out of the city. When there was no one around, he summoned the black beetle beast soul and covered himself in armor. After running for 2 hours, he came to a stone hill west of Sunset Slope. Having finally climbed to the top of the hill, Han Sen took a look in the direction of Sunset Slope. Among thousands of people fighting and yelling, there was a monster with the head of a cow, the upper body of a human, and the lower body of a horse. It was holding a double-edged golden axe and pushing its way through the crowd. No one could withstand the fierce blow of its axe. Han Sen happened to see the monster swinging the axe at Son of Heaven, who even had his blood-red sword. Son of Heaven did not dare to block the axe. He stepped on his own mount and leaped back a few feet. Roar! The monster's double-edged axe hit the Triceratops-like beast soul mount and split it in two halves. That broke Son of Heaven's heart. A mutant beast soul mount was very rare, with the same value as a small interstellar spaceship. How is this sacred blood creature so strong? Han Sen was shocked. The sacred blood creature ran and killed thousands of people in a flash, and no one was able to fight back. Even people as strong as Qin Xian, Son of Heaven, and Fist Guy didn't dare to engage in a frontal attack. Hit by all sorts of alloy arrows and beast soul arrows, the monster still didn't even get a scratch. When it swung the axe, no one could get close. Such a mighty creature corresponded to Han Sen's impression of a sacred blood creature. The sacred blood black beetle he killed was way too weak compared to this monster. It was only a little stronger than an ordinary black beetle and didn't even feel like a sacred blood creature. People were expecting to trap the sacred blood creature, but now a key buffer was lost as the Mount of Son of Heaven was killed. The sacred blood creature was charging madly, waving the golden double-edged axe and leaving screams, blood, and limbs behind. It took it only moments to rush out of the siege to the mountain. At the foot of the mountain, it even smugly turned around and stood on its back legs, mooing like a cow before it ran into the mountain. #K. It wants to escape. Son of Heaven furiously summoned a green eagle-shaped beast soul, which turned into a green iron bow in his hand. Then he summoned a fiery beast soul in the shape of a giant six-winged wasp as his arrow. Seeing the arrow, Qin Xian and Fist Guy exclaimed, "A sacred blood beast soul of a six-winged wasp." They had joined force with Son of Heaven in hunting the sacred blood six-winged wasp. Son of Heaven was the one who had launched the final blow. They just didn't expect him to be so lucky to have gained its beast soul. There were less than 10 beast souls known to people in the entire steel armor shelter, and many were left by those who already had evolved and gone to Second God's sanctuary. Son of Heaven, stop. It's a beast soul that can only be used once. If you failed to kill it, Luo Tianyang wanted to stop him, but it was too late. Son of Heaven had already shot the sacred blood beast soul arrow with a full draw. The arrow turned into a red lightning bolt flying towards the sacred blood creature.
Bang!
The sacred blood creature felt the imminent danger and turned around. The wasp arrow shot into its chest and exploded, bursting open its flesh. The monster fell to the ground, losing its vitality as its internal organs and blood sprayed out. "How dare you kill my mount? There is no way I'd let you live after doing that," Son of Heaven yelled loftily, standing like a king, leaving everyone in shock. While proud to see the crowd being impressed, including Qin Xian, Son of Heaven suddenly saw a green shadow shooting down from the sky into the dying sacred blood creature and ended its life. A golden figure immediately rushed down from the stone hill nearby and approached the sacred blood creature. Lifting the golden double-edged axe to his shoulder, the mysterious figure ran towards the mountain in a flash. Dolar. Su Xiaoqiao recognized Han Sen's unique golden armor in no time and called out loud. Han Sen was hiding on the stone hill when the sacred blood creature charged in his direction. As he was deciding whether to retreat, he saw Son of Heaven shoot down the sacred blood creature. Anger surged and Han Sen rushed down the stone hill while summoning the bronze crescent spear. He shot the spear at the monster and hit it in the wounded chest, killing the dying creature. Sacred Blood Bloody Slayer killed. Sacred Blood Beast Soul Bloody Slayer gained. Eat the flesh of Bloody Slayer to gain 0 to 10 sacred Geno points randomly. The voice in the back of his head brought him intense joy. He had just gained another Sacred Blood Beast Soul. His luck was too good to believe. However, Han Sen did not have time to celebrate. The body of the Bloody Slayer was too large for him to take away, but what he could take away was the giant golden axe. The creatures in God's sanctuary could produce certain treasures through special means. People called these treasures gears. Although gears were just like solid items and could not be summoned like beast souls, they could perform as well as beast souls if they were produced by advanced creatures. The Bloody Slayer was peerless when holding the golden axe, and the axe could easily break normal beast soul weapons and beast soul mounts, so it proved to be an excellent sacred blood gear. Han Sen's goal was to get the golden axe, and the beast soul of Bloody Slayer was completely unexpected loot. Watching Han Sen running on the mountain with the golden axe, everyone was stunned.
Moterfker.
Son of Heaven let out a raging roar when he realized what had happened. With a black wildebeest summoned as his mount, he rode madly in Han Sen's direction. Behind him, his gang all raced off on their own mounts to chase Han Sen, roaring and rebuking him. Han Sen did not expect the golden axe to be so terribly heavy. With 8 sacred Geno points, he was already a lot stronger than before, yet he could still barely walk with the axe, not to mention run. The Bloody Slayer made it seem so light. How could I run off with such a heavy weapon? Han Sen looked back and could already see Son of Heaven and his gang only half a mile from him. Although it was too heavy to carry, Han Sen would never leave behind such an excellent sacred blood gear. He suddenly thought of his newly gained beast soul of the Bloody Slayer, took a look at it, and suddenly cheered up. Type of sacred blood Bloody Slayer's beast soul, shape-shifting. Without thinking, Han Sen summoned the beast soul of Bloody Slayer, and a majestic shadow galloped out, looking just like the monster, only missing the giant axe. The beast soul ran towards Han Sen and was instantly integrated with him. His body was transformed into a Bloody Slayer, and the black beetle armor changed its shape accordingly, still fully covering Han Sen's body as a Bloody Slayer. After all, beast soul armor was not as rigid as man-made ones and could change according to the shape of the body. After shape-shifting, Han Sen felt so energetic that the golden axe was now nothing to him. Running with 4 hoofs, he also became incredibly fast. Han Sen surged up the mountain at full speed and disappeared, far outpacing the gang. Everyone was speechless, as everything happened so fast. Many smirked as they watched Son of Heaven and others who were still chasing Han Sen. *T. Who was that guy? He's got some nerve jumping into the boiling pot. And what loot! In addition to the golden axe, he gained a sacred blood beast soul. Can you imagine how much it must be worth? You think you could buy a sacred blood beast soul just with money? Haha, Son of Heaven must be so mad. A sacred blood beast soul. It would have been his but was taken away. The arrow he used seemed like a one-off sacred blood beast soul. And what did he get in return for such investment? LOL. I'm just afraid Son of Heaven will lose his mind. Didn't expect there to be a sacred blood beast soul. How lucky that guy is. He could never have killed the monster alone, and a dozen sacred blood creatures may not even render a single beast soul. It just happened that he gained everything with the last hit. Who was that guy indeed? Is there such a person in Steel Armor Shelter? I heard someone call him Doll, but not sure. Doll. Interesting name. After less than an hour, Son of Heaven returned gloomily with his gang, but people already knew it was impossible to find someone on the winding mountain trails. Son of Heaven immediately questioned Su Xiaoqiao when he got back. His exclamation $, had been a mistake. Su Xiaoqiao had no choice but to tell him everything about how he met Han Sen, which wasn't very helpful since all he had was a name, $. Son of Heaven didn't fully believe him, but couldn't do much as Su Xiaoqiao was in Qin Xian's gang. He bitterly led his gang back to Steel Armor Shelter and locked down the shelter, swearing to find $, and cut him into pieces. Most people did not learn the name $, while Doll became popular. For a while, Doll, Son of Heaven, Sacred Blood Creature, and Sacred Blood Beast Soul became the most popular topics in Steel Armor Shelter.